A lot of music, a lot of noise. I tip my hats off to my mother right now for putting up with all of that. You know, I'm the eldest of 10. My dad was Rayful Neal, who started all of this, and my mother was Shirley Neal. And they come off a little road called a section road in Irvingville. So I'm deep down in my roots sitting here in this seat. But coming up as a kid, my dad used to always have friends over like Lazy Lester, Slim Harpo, Lonesome Sundown, you know, Lightning Slim. So I grew up in a household of musicians coming by, stopping by, rehearsal. I don't even remember learning to play. It's just something always been a part of my life. Well, you know, my dad told me, I just got an article from one of my friends out of New York who interviewed my dad 20 years ago. And he sent me the interview, and my dad told him, and I remember this, my dad didn't want us to play blues because he said it was too hard to make a living doing it. He loved it, but son, if you want to do some music, try to do some pop or some rhythm and blues or something that people are listening to every day. The blues is going to be real hard to survive in because it was dying out. And also at the end of his conversation, he said, but they kept coming back playing the blues, my kids. And that's because it's in our heart and soul, and that's what we grew up listening to. And as I got older, I learned that we need to preserve this American roots music that we have, we call blues, which came from the gospel, from the church house, you know. So that's why I chose to go this route, and now I'm carrying the torch for those who come and gone. Well, I used to play little places around here in New Roads, and on the island there was a place called the Big Apple, Club 49. My dad used to play there, and we used to come to Joe Cato over here in New Roads and play at his place. And you know, when I was a kid, I used to have to sit out in the car and wait till my turn because I wasn't allowed to stay in the clubs that long. But I used to go, and my dad would come to the car and say, okay, son, it's time for you to come up and do a couple of songs. And he'll put me on the bar, and I'll do my little James Brown and my dancing, Otis Redding. And next thing you know, I'm going from table to table, picking up $1 here, $2 there, and I found out I could make some bucks. I was ready to sing the blues, man. But that's how I come up, playing the little juke joints around this area. Well, when I turned 18, I was in a club called the Executive Club in Baton Rouge. And this is somewhere around 76, 75, 76. And Sam Guy, who is Buddy Guy's brother, I was playing bass guitar. He walks on stage and stick a note in my pocket. When I got off stage, the note said, call Buddy Guy. And I'm going, man, call Buddy. I knew Buddy and Philip Guy and Sam because they was my dad's friends, but I'm wondering what he wants. So when I got to the payphone, of course, I had to call him collect because I didn't have the quarter, or the dime or whatever to put in it. And he said, look, Phil said he had just visited Louisiana a few months ago and he heard you play, and I need a bass player, and he told me you was pretty good on the bass. Would you be interested in playing? I go, you want me to play with you? He said, yes, I have a show to do in Austin, Texas next Tuesday, and I'll call your parents and talk to your dad, and if you want to come along, I'll love to have you aboard. And he said, you know, pack your suitcase and come on up and join us. I wanted to say, what suitcase, man? I've never been anywhere. And, so I caught a bus to Austin, Texas. I mean, I went home and told my mom, and of course she didn't want me to leave, and she cried. And my dad really wanted me to go but didn't want me to go, but he knew it was a way for me to get out of Baton Rouge, and it was an opportunity. And then and me being young, I was like excited. I'm ready to go, and didn't know where I was going, but I was ready to go, you know. And well, when I got to Austin, Texas, with my bass guitar, they called rehearsal, and I went over to rehearsal, and Buddy started naming these songs. Hey, do you know Big Boss Man? Do you know Honest I Do by Jimmy Reed? And man, it was like throwing the rabbit in the briar patch. I was right at home. I knew all these songs because my dad had groomed me already. And so I got the job. The first week I left home. Well, a buddy guy in Junior Wells was coming back to Baton Rouge the second week. So I left home as nobody, and I came back the following week. I was a star, man. And then I went to Chicago, and you know, a little nervous about going to Chicago, you know, country boy from here. Got to Chicago and found out most of the people I was meeting around Buddy Guy Club, he had a club called Checkerboard Lounge. They was all from Hammond, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Jackson, Mississippi. They was all Southern folk. So I felt at ease. And once I got the ball, I started running with it. It was a piece of cake to survive and live in Chicago. But I noticed that a lot of artists was going to Europe, and they had their own band, and they wasn't that great of players, but they had their own group. I said, wait a minute, maybe I should start writing me some songs and think about being a lead guy. If these guys can do it, I think I can do it. So I started writing my own music. And the way I used to get my connections, I would go buy blues albums, and I'll flip them over and look at the address on the back of the album, and I'll ship them my music through the address on the record. And end up landing a deal like that. Got some attention from a guy down in Florida. After Buddy Guy, you know, I went to go under Kenny Neal, and it was real slow for me because I was trying to make a name on my own. And so what I did, I convinced a club owner to hire me as a house band. And in Toronto, Canada, I ended up moving up to Toronto, Canada from Chicago. And I talked this guy into me being a house band. So what I used to do, I would call back to Chicago and call Buddy and say, hey Buddy, can you play with me for 1 week? And you know, Buddy is doing well now, but back then I still have the contracts. I would give him a plane ticket, $1,200 for the week, and a hotel room. And I would bring him in for a week. Then the next week I would bring in John Lee Hooker. The next week I would bring in Big Mama Thornton. So that just gave me all of that exposure I needed because I knew all of the older blues players, and I was friends. I was like their kid to them. And I would bring them up, but I got a deal with a company down in Florida as Kenny Neal. And I put my first album out, was called Bio on the Bayou. And we put out 5,000 copies. And less than 2 months, I was like #1 on the blues charts across the country. And so when that happened, Alligator Records from Chicago, a bigger company, came to see me and signed me up and took Bio on the Bayou off of that album and made their own cover and put the same record in, and they called it Big News from Baton Rouge. And that's where my career started. And about the third or fourth CD, I was doing a CD called Walking on Fire. One day the telephone rang in the office, and it was the Lincoln Center from New York City wanting me to come and audition for a Broadway show. And I told my manager, I said, man, I'm not an actor, I'm a blues player. And they want me to come to New York to audition. So I didn't chicken out, but I was a little scared to go up there. And I went in for the reading, and I read for the script. And I came out of the office, I told my manager, I said, man, that was one lousy reading I just did. I never will get this, you know. And that night, Albert King was playing in town in New York. So I went to see Albert King that night. On my way back from New York, we was flying back, I told my manager, I said, well, I won't be going to Broadway, but I definitely would be enjoyed myself watching Albert King last night. And 2 weeks later, they called me up and said, congratulations, we chose you for the lead role in this Broadway show. And I never thought, I never dreamed that. It was written by Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes. That was, she was from a little town called Edenville, Florida. And she also have a book called These Eyes Are Watching God. It's a spinoff from that. Love Triangle. And so Lincoln Center sent me to school, gave me coaching lessons, intensive coaching lessons, because I had no experience. And man, I got to, when I figured it all out and got my right coaching and went to rehearsal every day, 7 days a week, sometimes 12 hours a day, we hit Broadway. And it was learning how to throw your lines, because you can't ad-lib on Broadway. You got to do it like the play was written. But my music helped me because I knew how to phrase my lines. So I can tell you something in 3 different ways, or 4 different ways. So once I learned to have fun with my phrases on Broadway, it didn't get boring to me because I didn't have to say it the same way. I had to say the same thing, but I didn't have to say it the same way. And so that was at ease for me. But the funniest thing about it, after the Broadway was over with, I was on my way to Paris, France. And I was in New York waiting for my flight, and I said, let me call some of my old buddies from the Broadway show. And that particular day, I called Time, New York Times, had just came out with the winners of Broadway shows. And I won the Most Outstanding Newcoming Actor for the Theater World Award on Broadway. And they told me, oh, congratulations. So they thought I was calling them about I had won the award. But I was just calling to say, hello, how you doing? I go, award, Theater World Awards, what's that? So a lot of opportunities for theatrical stuff, but man, my heart lies in the blues, and I didn't want to focus, so if it was something that I really didn't want to take interest in, I turned it down. I continued to pursue my career. Melodies is what I come on. I mean, most of the music that I've recorded, I always came up with the melodies and the music first. And then I'll arrange it, and then I'll go out on the water or take me a trip out on the ocean and sit down and listen to it and say, oh, this sounds like Bloodline. This sounds like Can't Have Your Cake and Eat It Too. You know, and then once I get the title, then I write the story. So that's how I get inspired by the music. And sometime I come back to Baton Rouge, I come to Irvinville, or some of my friends over here in New Rose, and sit around and talk with them. And you can get ideas from that. Because I was sitting around the bar talking to one of my friends, and he said, man, blues ain't nothing but a good man feeling bad. I go, oh, thanks a lot. I wrote it down and wrote me a song from it. Well, I just came back from walking the red carpet with the Grammys. I was nominated this year, so that was a plus for me. I brought back to Louisiana a gold medallion, didn't get the Grammys, and in a couple of months I'm up for the Blues Music Awards in 3 different categories. But you know what, the main thing for me now in my career, because I'm comfortable now and I can relax, I'm not starving like I used to, but the main thing now is to produce the younger generation and pass it on and help them get their start. And so that's where my heart lies at now. And I just moved back from Palo Alto, California. I traded Palo Alto, Silicon Valley for a little piece of land between Baker and Zachary. And I'll be producing artists out of this area. Well, I just opened up a Neal's showcase room where bands that's new can come over, pencil themselves in, get on Facebook, invite their friends over and their fans, and have a place to play. And also, I work with the kids, Blues in the School. I go around and talk to the young, because that's where we got to start. And so I do Blues in the School, and also give away guitars. I work with a foundation out of Daytona Beach, Florida, Daytona, Florida, and it's called Kids Rock the Nation. And we give guitars to kids who can't afford and they have talent, and we give them 2 or 3 lessons, and the parents can take it from there. So just trying to give back. I'm getting ready to go up to New York May the 21st, but in a few days I'll be headed up to Chicago to meet with Buddy and the crew that we're going to take on this tour. It's called Prostate Awareness Tour. And the band is made up of the second generation of the blues guys. Like, we got Muddy Waters' son with us. We got Hound Dog Taylor kids. We got, man, you name it. Buddy Guy daughter is performing with us. All of the second generation. Lonnie Brooks' son. Stuff like that, you know, people like that who come from a blues family. Well, my advice to the younger generation that's coming up now, please learn about the business of it, because you can be a great artist, but business is 65–70% of it. You know, learn about your publishing, you know, BMI, ASCAP, people like that. Get your music registered, you know, and understand the business. And marketing is very important. So even though you might be a great musician, you know, set that aside and think about the business and the marketing and what you need to do to reach that goal. Man, New Rose, man, this is home. I mean, when I thought I was going to the city when they brought me to New Rose from Irvinville. You know, I used to go to the Rexall drugstore there, you know, and my grandfather had a little juke joint called Spooner's out in Irvinville there. And he would come to New Rose and pay his bills, and, you know, New Rose is my roots. This is my roots. This is where I come from. You know, a funny thing, I'm the eldest of 10. My dad used to take us over here in Falls River, and we would go fishing. But he probably didn't swim or was scared of water, but he would tie the boat to a tree, and we had about 20 foot of rope. And when we hit that 20-foot mark, it's time to come back to the bank. I tell my friends, oh, we've been out on the boat. Yeah, we was on the boat with a rope tied to it. So I have fond memories. I grew up around here, man. I know the folks. Yes, and I'm happy to come from here. Thank y'all so much. It's nice to come back home.
All right, nice seeing you.
Okay.